Marcus Hale had always considered himself a patient man, 38 years old, a structural engineer who spent his days calculating load-bearing tolerances and stress points in steel and concrete. He was someone who believed that almost any problem, if examined carefully enough, could be understood. He applied the same methodical logic to his marriage, to his finances, to the garden he'd been slowly coaxing into life along the back fence of their house on Birchwood Lane. He had not, however, applied that logic to his neighbour. Not until it was too late. The house next door belonged to a man named Raymond O'Say, a retired schoolteacher, 67 years old, widowed for 4 years. Raymond was the kind of man that neighbourhoods seemed to collect. Quiet, well-mannered, always waving from his porch, always offering tomatoes from his garden in summer. He had kind eyes and a slow, deliberate way of speaking that made people feel heard. The children on the street loved him. The Homeowners Association had elected him treasurer 3 years running. Nobody had a bad word to say about Raymond O'Say. Nobody was watching Raymond O'Say. That was, Marcus would later realize, exactly the point. His wife's name was Delia. They had been married for 3 years, together for 5. She was warm and impulsive, where he was measured and slow. The kind of complementary difference that works beautifully until it doesn't. Lately, it had been working less beautifully. Work stress, they told each other. A rough season. These things passed. Marcus first noticed something in the second week of October, on a Tuesday evening when he pulled onto Birchwood Lane and caught sight of Delia through the gap in Raymond's living room curtains. She was standing in the old man's kitchen, laughing, really laughing, the kind of full, unguarded laugh he hadn't heard from her in months, with a glass of red wine in her hand and her whole body tilted toward whatever Raymond was saying. It was such an ordinary domestic scene that Marcus almost didn't register the wrongness of it. He parked, sat in the car for a moment, and told himself he was being ridiculous. Then he went inside his own house and made dinner and said nothing. But he did not stop watching. It began with a phone. More specifically, it began with what Delia did when her phone rang at 11:14 on a Wednesday night, 3 days after that first uneasy moment through the window. She was beside him in bed, already half asleep, when the buzz came. In all their years together, Delia had never done anything unusual when her phone rang. That night, she snatched it before the second vibration, rolled out of bed, and went to the bathroom. The door clicked shut. He heard her voice, too low to make out words, for nearly 20 minutes. When she returned, she set the phone face down on the nightstand and said, "Sorry, it was Naira." Naira was her college friend who lived in Portland. Marcus nodded and said nothing. The next morning, he texted Naira on a flimsy pretext, some question about a birthday gift, and Naira replied cheerfully that she and Delia hadn't actually spoken in weeks because she'd been traveling. Marcus stared at the message until the words blurred. Then he set his phone face down on his own nightstand and went to work. After that, he catalogued everything. Not obsessively, he was too methodical for obsession, but systematically, the way he would document stress indicators in a building under load. Delia began wearing earrings to take out the recycling. She changed her phone passcode. His old attempt, the date of their wedding, failed twice in a row. She started offering to collect Raymond's mail, since he asked, and returned from those trips 45 minutes later, faintly flushed, smelling vaguely of a cologne that wasn't his. Small things. The kind of things that could each be explained away individually. The kind of things that only became damning when you lined them up and looked at the pattern. Marcus was very good at patterns. The Thursday everything broke open was an accident of scheduling. His afternoon meeting was cancelled at the last minute, a contractor pulled out, and he found himself turning onto Birchwood Lane at 2:30 in the afternoon instead of his usual 6:15. Delia's car was in their driveway, which was unusual. She worked until 5. He might have gone straight inside. He almost did. But something made him slow as he passed Raymond's front window. Some peripheral instinct, some gathering of evidence his conscious mind had not yet organized. And through the gap in the curtains he saw them. They were not doing anything dramatic. They were seated on Raymond's old leather sofa, close together, Delia's head tilted toward the old man's shoulder, his arm stretched along the back cushion just behind her, a posture of intimacy, of long settled familiarity. Raymond was speaking quietly, and Delia had her eyes closed the way she did when she was absorbing something completely, when she wanted to hold a moment still. Marcus stood on the sidewalk for a long count of 10. Then he walked to Raymond's front door and knocked. The door opened almost immediately, too immediately, and Delia stood there, colour flooding from her throat to her face in a wave. Behind her, Raymond had risen from the sofa and was straightening his sweater with the deliberate calm of a man who has rehearsed for unexpected arrivals. Marcus. Just his name. No sentence to follow it. "I came home early," he said. The voice he used when reviewing a failed design. Quiet, precise, holding back the pressure. "Tell me what's happening." "Nothing is happening. Too fast." He looked past her at Raymond, who met his gaze directly, without the guilty flinch Marcus had expected. That steadiness bothered him more than anything else, as if the old man had already made his peace with this moment. "Come home," Marcus said to Delia. "Now." She followed. They stood in their kitchen in the flat grey afternoon light, and Marcus put his briefcase on the table and turned to face her and waited. "It happened only once," she said at last. Her chin lifted slightly, the gesture of someone who has decided that the best defense is forward motion. "He was lonely. He lost his wife. It didn't mean anything, Marcus. It was one moment and it's over. Why are you making this into such a big deal?" The words struck him, not like a blow, but like a miscalculation discovered after the structure is already built, the kind that makes you go back to the very beginning and question every assumption. Not the confession itself, not even the betrayal, the tone. The casual irritation in her voice, as if his pain were a disproportionate response to something essentially minor, something that a reasonable man would absorb and set aside. "You lied to me," he said. "You told me you were talking to Naira at 11 at night. She was in Japan." A flicker crossed her face. Recalculation. "I didn't want you to worry." "You didn't want me to know." "It's not what you think." "What do I think, Delia?" "Tell me what I think. Because right now, the only thing I can think is that you've been lying to me for weeks, going next door to see a 67-year-old man. And when I find out, your first response is to tell me I'm overreacting." He picked up his briefcase. "I'm going for a drive. When I come back, I want the truth, not a managed version of it. The whole thing." He sat in a parking lot for an hour, staring at the dashboard. He was not crying. He was thinking, back to the foundations, back to the original load assumptions, back to where the first calculation had gone wrong. When he returned, Delia had made tea she wasn't drinking. She told him, in the careful tone of someone dismantling a bomb one wire at a time, that it had been one night, a moment of weakness. Raymond emotional about the anniversary of his wife's death, her trying to comfort him, a line crossed that she could never adequately explain. She was sorry. It was over. She wanted them to move forward. He wanted to believe her. He truly, genuinely wanted to. But Marcus was an engineer. He believed in structural evidence. That night, while Delia slept, he opened his laptop and did what any man trained to find hidden failures would inevitably do. He started with their joint bank account. The withdrawals were subtle. $80 here, $150 there, the kind of amounts that wouldn't trigger a second look in a household their size. But when he lined them up on a spreadsheet, mapped them against dates, cross-referenced them with Delia's shared calendar, she had forgotten he still had access. A pattern materialized with the terrible clarity of a stress fracture finally made visible under light. The withdrawals corresponded, almost precisely, with Delia's afternoon visits next door. He stared at the screen. Then he reframed the question. What if it wasn't Delia withdrawing? What if these were deposits, cash handed to her, moved through the account in ways designed to look like routine spending? He called the bank the next morning from his office, voice carefully neutral, and requested a full transaction report for the past 6 months. When it arrived, he read it 3 times. 6 cash deposits made at the branch 2 miles from their house, totaling just under $4,000. The first one was dated 7 months ago, not 4 months, not 1 month, 7, exactly 12 days after Raymond Osei had moved in next door. Not one night, not one moment of weakness, 7 months. He did not go to Delia. He called his colleague Amara Reyes, a forensic accountant he'd worked with on a fraud case 2 years earlier, and asked her quietly if she could help him understand what he was looking at. Amara came over on a Saturday while Delia was visiting her sister, sat at the kitchen table with the statements, and was quiet for almost 10 minutes. "These deposits," she said finally, "are structured to stay just under reporting thresholds. Someone who made them understood how banking oversight works." He was a schoolteacher, Marcus said. Retired schoolteachers can have interesting second chapters. She looked at him steadily. "Do you know anything about his finances?" He did not, but he knew where to begin. Raymond Osei, it turned out, was considerably wealthier than anyone on Birchwood Lane had suspected. His late wife Clarissa had come from family money, real estate holdings in 3 states, an investment portfolio that her death had transferred entirely to him. He was not a struggling widower surviving on a pension. He was a quietly comfortable man, with more money than loneliness could spend, and, apparently, a very particular idea of how some of it might be used. Marcus found the gifts next. A silk scarf he'd assumed was a work present. A bottle of perfume he didn't recognize. A slim gold bracelet with a tiny Italian hallmark that a jeweler friend confirmed retailed around $600. A piece Delia wore only when she seemed to think he wasn't paying attention. He had filed each of these things away at the time, told himself there were explanations. He looked at them now with different eyes. On a Sunday afternoon, he crossed the lawn and knocked on Raymond's door. Raymond opened it and looked at him for a long moment with those calm, unhurried eyes. Then he stepped back and let him in without a word. The house smelled of cedar and old books. Raymond led him to the sitting room, the same leather sofa, the same curtains, and settled into his chair with the deliberateness of a man who has been expecting this visit for some time. "You know why I'm here," Marcus said. "I suspected. I want the truth. All of it. From you. Because I don't believe I'll get it from her." Raymond was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, there was no deflection in it. "I care about Delia. I want you to understand that. What happened between us was real to me. I'm not going to pretend otherwise." The honesty of it knocked Marcus entirely off his prepared footing. He had come ready for denial, for the performance of innocence. This was something else. "The money," Marcus said. "I gave her gifts. Money, sometimes. She didn't ask. I want to be clear about that. It was always my choice." "Why?" A long pause. "Because my wife used to say that the most loving thing you can do for someone is make their life easier. I wanted to do that for Delia." He looked at his hands. "I know how that sounds to you." "How long?" Marcus said. Raymond met his eyes. "Since July." July. 4 months before Marcus had noticed anything. 7 months in total. "She told me it happened once," Marcus said. "I know," Raymond said quietly. "I know what she told you." Marcus drove home and sat in the driveway until the light changed. When he went inside, Delia was on the couch with a book, her feet curled under her in the way he had always found endearing. She looked up and read something in his face immediately. "You went over there," she said. 7 months, Delia." He kept his voice level. It cost him something to do that. "Not one night. 7 months. Gifts, cash, a $600 bracelet you wear when you think I'm not looking. 7 months." She did not deny it. For the first time since this had begun, she did not reach for a simpler, more survivable version of the truth. She just looked at him, and he saw in her face the expression he recognized from the hardest structural reviews he'd ever sat through. The expression of someone who has been holding up something that has finally, quietly given way. "I didn't know how to tell you," she said. "That's not good enough." "No," she agreed, "it isn't." He sat across from her, not beside her. Across. He needed the distance right now. "What did you want? What was it that he gave you that you felt you couldn't say you needed?" She was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was the smallest he had ever heard it. "He listened," she said. "Not the way you listen when you're already waiting for your turn to speak. He really listened. And I know how that sounds. I know it's every cliché of why people do this, but that's what it was." She paused. "I was so lonely, Marcus. I was so lonely, and I didn't say it out loud because I didn't know how, and I'm so sorry I made it your problem instead of just saying it to your face." Lonely. The same word Raymond had used to explain himself, and Marcus sat with the terrible symmetry of that. Two lonely people living under the same roof, the distance between them wide enough for someone else to walk through undetected for 7 months. They did not separate that night, or the next. They moved through the house the way people navigate a building that has suffered serious damage, carefully, with constant awareness of which walls still bore weight and which had already cracked beyond load. They started therapy with a counselor named Dr. Simone Varga, a small, precise woman who listened with her whole body and said very little in their first 2 sessions, and then said, in their third, the thing Marcus would carry in his chest for a long time afterward. The affair was a symptom. The real question is whether you want to treat what was underneath it. Raymond Ossé put his house on the market in December and moved to a retirement community near his daughter in Atlanta. The morning the moving truck came, Marcus watched from his kitchen window, the same window through which this whole story had first begun to take shape, as the old man directed the movers with quiet, unhurried authority. Before he climbed into the waiting car, Raymond glanced across the lawn at Marcus's house. Their eyes met through the glass. Raymond nodded once, small, dignified, final. Marcus did not nod back, but he did not look away either. He thought about what it meant to calculate the load a structure could truly carry, how you had to account not only for the weight already pressing down on it, but for the forces that would come with time. Wind, expansion, the slow, invisible accumulation of stress that no inspection had ever caught. A building could stand for decades under perfect conditions and still fail if one hidden assumption had been wrong at the very beginning. He and Delia were still in the house, still in the marriage. Whether that was genuine strength or inertia or something far too complicated for either word, he hadn't yet decided. But every morning he got up. Every morning he did the work the day required. And that, he told himself, was always where rebuilding had to start. Not with certainty, not with forgiveness, not with any promise about what the finished thing would look like. Just the next careful, deliberate step.